So all quests start in exactly the same way. We read the introduction on the very first quest card in the quest deck. Moth to a flame. Hunted by day and haunted by night, you carve a path through the unforgiving jungle. When your eyes close, shadowy visions rage unchecked, an ancient monolith rising from the depths of the earth. Were it not for the urchin's timely warnings and unerring sense of direction, you would have perished long ago. The beggar's blindfold was lost weeks past, yet her ruined eye sockets remain unnerving. The child seems to see more than this world alone. So this is the mysterious urchin that we have along for the ride. She's kind of guiding us through the jungle. And when we turn over the card, and this is true for all kind of quest encounters and location encounters, there'll be some instructions that we do when we reveal the card. Okay, so it says, on reveal, you are being hunted. Spawn jungle wild in pursuit 5 time. All right, so this is our first kind of quest instruction. When we spawn, it simply means we're pulling a denizen from the content pool in the Ziggurat. So it says jungle wild. So we pull the jungle faction deck and we're looking at the top card for the wild keyword. We don't see it there. So we need to progress the deck. And all that means is to take the card off the top of the deck and place it on the bottom. And we keep doing that until we find a card with the wild keyword. Okay, there we go. Fauna wild giant. And so it says in pursuit time 5. So the play area is kind of roughly divided into 3 regions. There's the peril track, which sits here next to the quest and threat decks. And this is a kind of area for things that are outside of your immediate domain. These are things that are going on elsewhere within the dungeon. Then we have the map area, which is kind of loosely defined in the middle of our play area, and the map will expand as we choose how we want those individual map tiles to be laid out. And then in the right-hand side of the play area, we have the encounter area, and these are the things that are kind of in media res. They're right here and now, the things that we're currently contending with. And this isn't one of them. So this guy is in pursuit. So it's a creature from the jungle that's been hunting us, and he's still in the background, somewhere out there in the jungle. Now to represent that, we have time. So it says time 5, which means we're going to get 5 little time tokens and place them onto our jungle creature. And this time pool represents how far behind this particular creature is. So time 5, they're quite far away. We've kind of given them the slip for now, but no doubt later in the quest we may have to contend with them. So next on our little task list here is to reveal and read the first card of the threat deck. The Viridian Shroud. The lush jungle foliage finally gives way to the remnants of an ancient civilization. The ruins overrun by the advancing wilderness. An immense ziggurat rises from the center of the forgotten city, its polished megaliths in stark contrast to the rotting metropolis in its surrounds. All threat cards have a similar sort of format and a special kind of format. In the top right-hand corner, we have the loot level, which kind of indicates how dangerous the dungeon is. And at the very bottom of the card, we have a threat track, which we'll use to kind of track time as we go through the adventure. And the main body of the card, in this case titled Scout and Move Action, really defines rule changes or specific environmental behaviors that exist that are unique to this particular quest. In our instance, it says the scout and move action, which is one of our general hero actions, is slightly changed for this particular quest. It says overgrown jungle. And essentially the jungle is so dense and overgrown that we can only ever reveal a single map tile when all tiles have been explored. So we can make very slow progress through the jungle in the tutorial quest. And it also has a little note here. When you close your eyes, you see a great monolith. All right, no problem. And so we're going to place the threat deck back here on the left-hand side, and we're going to put a little tracking token onto the threat track so that we can keep track of time passing. Then we look finally at quests, next steps. You are drawn by the vision of a great monolith. Search the jungle for an entrance to the Ziggurat. And so it says we're looking to explore the throne room at Z3. So bear that in mind as you adventure through the jungle. Once we discover the throne room, we will progress the quest deck. Now we move into the sort of standard game loop. And that is where we take a hero action, then we'll check to see if there's anything going on in the dungeon that we need to pay attention to, and then take another hero action. And we'll keep doing that until we perish or complete the quest. But before we go any further, I thought it might be a good opportunity to just quickly have a look at the player aids that are available to us. So there is a comprehensive rulebook and a getting started guide, and you should probably skim through those to get a sense of how the game comes together. But while you're playing, you should only need to refer to the individual player aids that are available. And they're really just a summary of the key rules in the game that you need as you play. And they're color-coded. The first are kind of universal rules, things like a description of the game loop, what happens when time passes, how to do skill checks, and how the grit track works. Then the green ones, these are all the general hero actions that you can take. Things like scout and move, or explore, or take a rest action. And on the reverse of that little rule summary are a series of frequently asked questions for that particular hero action. These little blue cards, these are also hero actions, or perhaps they're better described as interactions. So when you meet a denizen, you might take a parley action. And if a peaceful resolution is not in the offing, you may need to enter the fray. And when you enter the fray, you're effectively initiating combat. And the other little player aids are a summary for the attack phase of combat, the defense phase of combat, and then the conditions and combat statuses that you might encounter during the course of your battle. All right, so we have explored the plaza, but where do we go now? Well, we haven't got any other map tiles revealed, so we're going to need to take a scout and move action to try and reveal some additional tiles. Now, normally when you're playing in the quest, you can reveal as many tiles as there are unconnected doorways. And I should mention, or at least talk about what we mean by a doorway. So if I look at any particular map tile, you'll notice that on some of the edges of these tiles, you'll find an arc. And there are a solid arc, which represents a standard door, or there's a broken arc or a dotted arc, which represents a secret door. Ordinarily, you would reveal as many tiles as you have unconnected doorways, and then you could put them in any order that you want. But for the sake of the tutorial, we're only allowed to reveal a single tile at a time. And so I'm going to do that right now. We have the temple ruins. Okay, so the temple ruins has a couple of standard doors. And I'm going to, I think I'll just connect that like so. Just a quick note about door connections. You always have to have 3 sides touching. You can't just have a single connection point like that. That's an illegal connection. You have to have 3 sides connected, but you could connect that in any number of different ways and any number of and in any orientation. So whenever you reveal and place a new map tile, you have to immediately put an exploration token onto that tile. So I'm going to pick an exploration token and place that onto that tile. And that indicates that it's unexplored. We know that region exists, but we haven't had a chance to explore it yet. And that's the end of our hero action. So we check the peril track. There's nothing to do here just at the moment. We come back to the hero phase and choose another action. All right, so that action we're going to take is, funnily enough, the explore action. So when you explore, you move to an adjacent, unexplored location. So the temple ruins. And the moment you do that, time passes. So time passes is a special event that'll happen quite a bit during the course of your adventure. And there's a little checklist of the things that you need to do when time passes. Now this player aid gives you quite a comprehensive checklist, but in reality, there's probably only a few steps that activate each time time passes. For example, the very first step is resist poison. Each time time passes, if you're poisoned, you'll need to resist poison at this time. None of us are poisoned. We'll have to resolve any timed actions that might be on the board. So sometimes you'll have a dungeon that has an environment that has a timed action, such that every time time passes, that action will take place. We don't have any timed actions, so nothing to do there. We reduce time pools. We do have a time pool. We have a time pool for our enemy in pursuit. And whenever time passes, we're going to take one of the tokens off each time pool and place it to the side. And then last but not least, we increase the threat track. Ba-bum. And that's time passes. So once time's passed, we will explore this particular location and have a look at the exploration token, and it is a locked door. So generally exploration tokens, well, they're often good things. They fall into 3 broad categories. There are locked doors and barricades or barriers, and then there are chests and puzzle boxes where you might find additional loot. And there's also second wind. You might get a little bit of healing or a little boost to your grit. In the case of a barrier, we need to place that on an unconnected doorway. And I think I'll just place that here. And that effectively becomes another hero action that we can take at that location. We could use a hero action, for example, to unlock that door. And we won't be able to scout across that direction or in that direction until such time as the barrier has been removed. Okay, so next we need to have a look at what is at this location. It's J1, and we're going to have a look at the location encounters for J1. Always we check the quest deck to see if we're about to progress the quest deck, and in this case we know we're looking for Z3, so we'll go to the location encounter deck and look for a matching J1 encounter. The temple ruins. Oh. Sunlight filters through the luxuriant flora, casting a mosaic upon the temple ruins. Razor-edged leaves softly caress your skin with sinister intent. You are wrapped in the hazardous affections of the Sententia folosa, the kissing vine. Your sole defense lies in a compelling display of charm. A melodic song, a heartfelt sonnet, or sheer bravado could release its perilous hold. Okay, so we're kind of ensconced in razor-sharp leaves from a semi-sentient piece of plant of the flora of the jungle. And it says here on our on reveal that we need to check presence. So this is our very first skill check. And a nice thing about the Ziggurat is that all skill checks have exactly the same format. We're going to roll a 6-sided dice, which represents our action, and then we'll apply any relevant modifiers to that die to get an action score. So our action score is the action die result plus whatever modifiers we have. It says check presence, so we need to do a skill check against the stat we have for presence on our hero. And unfortunately, our presence is 0. So we don't get any modifier, any positive modifier in any event. So presence is like a kind of combination of willpower, charisma, and perhaps faith. So the other thing we roll are these 2 fate dice. So they're 2 8-sided dice. And what we're trying to do is determine how many of these 8-sided dice are below our action score. So the more of these fate die that are below the action score, the better our result. Let's do that. Okay. Ooh, worst possible outcome imaginable. Okay, so we don't get any modifier, so that's a 3. And we have 2 8s. 2 8s. So both of those are above the action score, so it's a fail no matter what. Whenever you have doubles when you do a skill check, then you have what's called a match. And in this case, it is a mismatch. Now, if we had, say, double 1s, we'd have had them below the action score, and we'd have a hit match. And it shouldn't surprise you that a hit match, good things happen, and in a mismatch, like a critical fail, bad things happen. It's not so bad when it's not in combat, but in combat it can be a lot worse. So anyway, we have missed this roll, and whenever you miss a skill check, your determination, your grit will increase. And there's a little note at the bottom of that component that says add 1 grit for any missed skill check. And that doesn't matter, whatever the skill check is, could be a combat roll, could be a non-combat roll, you'll always increase your grit if you miss. Now let's look at some of the other options that we could have had. So in the case of our roll, let's say we'd rolled a 5 and we had a 1 and a 7. So 1 is obviously beneath the 5, so we have a single fate die that is beneath the action score, and that would be called a weak hit. So it's a kind of partial success, a success perhaps with some consequences. On the other hand, if we'd rolled, say, a 3 and a 1, and both of those are below the action score, then we have a strong hit or a strong success, and that's always going to be a good outcome. All right, so we missed. Let's tally up the score and see what happened. So there are 3 possible outcomes. We can have a strong hit, a weak hit, and a miss. On a miss, you are flagellated by the flora and lose d6 plus 2 hit points of party damage. Well, we're the only member in the party, so we're going to get all of that damage. So we roll d6 plus 2, so that's 4 hit points of damage. Now, we do have armor 1, and unless the damage is piercing, it's always going to count towards mitigating that damage. We get 4 minus 1, we take 3 points of damage, and our hit points are reduced to 7. Now, this is an event, so the moment we finish those instructions, we're going to conclude that particular location encounter, and we're going to move it to our memory pile. Now, inside the hero tableau, anytime we complete a location encounter or defeat an enemy, they will go into a kind of mixed discard pile called our memories, which just sits inside our party tableau. Now, depending on your hero, the abilities they have, or the items you may be carrying, it's possible to interact with things that are in your memories during the course of your quest. But more often than not, you're going to process those memories at the next rest action. So whenever you take a rest action, at the conclusion of that rest action, you'll convert any memories that you have into experience points. And we'll look at that a little bit later. Okay, so that hero action's over. There's nothing to do here in the peril track, and we'll take another hero action. So we're going to scout and move again. So I could explore here and try and locate this secret door. But what I think I might do instead is move back to the plaza. That's one doorway action. And then I'm going to scout. And I can only draw one tile, unfortunately, in this particular ziggurat. And reveal. What do we got here? The Fallen Gate. Let's put that right here, like so. I'm going to reach into our little exploration token bucket and place an exploration token down. And then the next action I'm going to take is to explore. We'll move into this particular tile. Time passes. We're going to remove one of these little elements from the time pool and increase the threat track. Have a look at this exploration token. What does it say? Locked shadow, another locked door. It's all full of locked doors. I'll put that there. And we're going to see what's at J3. It's not our quest, so we're going to look into the location encounter deck and grab the encounter for J3, the Fallen Gate. Approaching the dilapidated ley gate, you inspect the faded glyphs etched into its weathered surface. You pause, senses keen, but it's too late. The ground gives way to a concealed trapdoor, and a monstrous arachnid lunges forth from its hidden burrow, its gleaming chelicerae poised to strike. Oh, that's bad. Okay, so interestingly, this is our first peril choice. So if you have a look at the bottom of that card, you'll notice there's a little peril statement there. It says peril, check shadow 5. So when you have a location encounter that has a peril choice, you need to resolve that choice before turning the card over. So sometimes that'll be a skill check and you'll have to resolve that skill check in some way and you'll have a success or failure. But other times it'll actually be a choice and you'll have to decide to do, A or B or C before you turn the card over. In this case, it's check shadow 5. So that's similar to the last skill check that we had where it said check presence. This time it's saying check shadow. So our shadow attribute is +2. That's good. We're going to have a +2 modifier for this skill check. But it's a little bit different. It's called a skill check with progress. And that's where the 5 comes in, the 5 in parentheses. So in this instance, we need to roll the skill check and look for a result value. And then we keep rolling skill checks until our result value is 5 or greater, or we miss a skill check. So let's try that. Terrible. All right, so we have 2. We have +2 because we're very sneaky and perceptive. So we get a 4, but tragically a 4 it's just not good enough. It's nowhere near 6 and 8, and so we fail. Of course, as soon as we miss a skill check, we gain some grit, so our grit goes up to 4, and we'll have to turn over to the next side and look at the option for failure. But let's say we had a slightly different outcome. Let's look at how that skill check may have played out if we had been successful. All right, so in this instance, we have rolled a 6. We get +2, so we get an 8. The 8 doesn't count because it can't be equal. It has to be less than, and the 7 would count. And we get a result by looking at the very highest fate die that sits underneath our action score. So remember, this is 6 + 2, so that's an 8, and we've got a 7 that sits under that action score, and so we have a result of 7. And that result is better than a 5, so we are successful. If we'd only rolled a 2, for example, we would have kept that 2 and banked it, and then rolled another skill check and accumulated that result. And again, you just keep rolling if you're successful until you get 5 or greater, or you fail. All right, so let's face the music. We failed abysmally there, and we're going to have to see what the outcome is. You'll notice there are two specific regions on this card. There's a success region and a failure region. We're going to ignore the success region completely and just read the failure. You are ambushed and dragged into the spider's den. Spawn jungle arachnid and the hero is stun 1. Well, that's not great. So we're going to start our combat, in this instance, stunned. So I'll just grab the little stunned token and place that at the top of the hero just to remind me of that fact. And let's have a look at how we spawn an enemy. So it says spawn jungle arachnid. So we know what jungle means. It means go to the jungle faction deck. We're looking for the first card at the top that has arachnid. And of course, well, there just happens to be one. That's nice. And then we reveal the card. Now, whenever you reveal a denizen card, as long as the encounter hasn't said enter the fray, which means initiate combat, then there's a chance that you might be able to have a peaceful resolution with this particular denizen. Now, sometimes, or quite often, the denizen will actually have a little parlay option that sits here at the top of their traits and power window. In the case of our Spiderwing Jimmy, he's not very friendly. But you might also have options in your hero tableau. You might have an ability or an item or a companion that allows you to, say, talk to spiders. You might be a spider whisperer, who knows? And so you could still potentially have an option to parlay with this particular denizen. Unfortunately, old Spiderwing Jimmy, he's not very happy with us, and he is going to initiate combat. We will need to enter the fray. So we have the denizen action player aid. We weren't able to do any of the parlay options, and we will need to initiate combat and enter the fray. So the first thing we do when we enter the fray is to determine just how strong this particular enemy is going to be and whether or not he brings along any friends to the battle. So it's not uncommon at all to have multiple enemies to fight in a conflict like this. So in order to determine his strength, we need to look at the threat card. And again, in the top right-hand corner, there's this loot level. And it says loot level, all denizens, 2. So the loot level is 2. The more dangerous the dungeon becomes, the higher the loot level. So with a loot level of 2, we're going to draw 2 loot cards. Again, we don't reveal them. And what we're really doing is running through the kind of strip here at the bottom of our denizen. When we do a enter the fray action, we're really looking at this kind of bottom strip for determining how strong this particular denizen is going to be. We've drawn 2 loot cards, and the very first thing here is this chaos icon. And what we're looking for are any loot cards that match, that have that chaos icon on the front. Now, if they don't have the chaos icon, we're going to discard the card. So that has a Jed pillar. We don't want that. We're going to discard that particular loot. So he has a single loot card. The next thing we look at is bolster. And so the bolster step, bolster is just a fancy word for to make stronger. And in this instance, you may have a mention in the encounter to bolster that particular creature. There may be some reason why it's stronger than normal. Or it may be an elite creature. So if they're elite, they have a little shield badge here next to their health. This one's not elite. But if he were elite, he would also gain an extra card. Well, in this instance, he doesn't get any extra cards. He just has 1 equipment card, like so. And we tuck that underneath our enemy. And that's how strong he is. So remember, we're looking at this kind of bottom strip. The first is the icon that we're going to match when we do the loot match. The next is the loot limit. That's the maximum number of equipment cards that this particular enemy can hold, so only 2. In this case, he's only got 1, so we don't need to go any further. But if he had, say, 3 or more loot cards, then we would tuck 2 cards underneath this card and the excess loot cards would go to a friend. And it says Jungle Arachnid Flora. So we would draw and spawn another card and attach the excess loot. And so it's in that way that the amount of loot determines just how tough your opposition is going to be. But this is the tutorial. It should be relatively straightforward, I hope. He's only got a single loot card. He's not going to be that tough. But we are stunned. We are stunned. We failed. Our spider sensors did not work, and so we need to enter combat in the first round with no attack. So when we enter combat, we have a little combat round tracker, which we use to track the individual rounds. There are slightly different things that will happen at the conclusion of each round. So I'm going to put that little round tracker on number 1, and we will start our conflict. So every round of combat has 2 phases. It has an attack phase and a defense phase. And we always roll on behalf of the hero, never on behalf of the enemy. So in the attack phase, we'll roll an attack, and in the defense phase, we'll roll a defense for the entire party, and the enemies will act the way they act. It's very deterministic. There's no specific role for the enemy. So let's have a look at some of our options before we get cracking. So notice, remember, we had the keen throwing knife we picked up at the beginning of our quest. You can use, during combat, any item that has a combat type or a quick type. So we could use either of these items. One of the restrictions is you cannot convert equipment into items during combat. So we can only work with the items that we actually have at the beginning of the combat or when the combat was initiated. And you're restricted to using a single item per combat round. I think we'll just hold on to these for a moment, but just bear in mind that they are available to us when we fight this particular Spiderwing Jimmy. So normally we can take a combat action, which is a hero attack, using our hero weapon. Or alternatively, we can do what's called a fighting retreat, and we can kind of run away to fight another day. And that's actually not a bad option in the Ziggurat. If you're facing overwhelming odds, running away to fight another day, you know, is not all that bad. So ordinarily we would take a hero attack, but unfortunately, because we're stunned, we don't get any action this particular turn. And for that penalty, we're going to get +2 grit. So if you don't take an action in the attack phase or in the defense phase, you can get +2 grit. So we could, I mean, strictly speaking, we could still take the fighting retreat action even though we're stunned, but we cannot do an attack. Okay, so we're going to do nothing. Then we'll roll for defense. Ooh. Okay, so it's a standard skill check. We've got 6 and our attack is +1. So we've got an equivalent of 7. So for our defense, we have a 5 and a 1. Now for a defense, whenever you do a defense roll, if you're wearing armor, you get what's called a bonus result. If you have a bonus result, it means you get to count all of the fate die that are underneath your action score. Normally, when you're just looking at a basic result, you'll only get the highest die that sits underneath the action score. But in this instance, pretty cool, we're going to have a total of 6 defense. Now, interestingly enough, you can actually apply each individual die to a different enemy. So if we were facing multiple enemies, I could put one die to that enemy and another die to a different enemy. But in this case, there's only the Spiderwing Jimmy, so we're going to put both of these dice to that defense. So let's have a look at what Spiderwing Jimmy will do for his particular attack. So underneath his power section, you can see he has 2 separate powers. He has a neurotoxin and a death charm. But the prefix in front of death charm says equip 2, and that means he needs to have 2 equipment cards in order to be able to activate that specific power. In this instance, he's only got a single card, which means he's the equivalent of equip 1, and he's going to take the best power option that he has available to him, which is just the neurotoxin. So in this instance, we exhaust his card, we do his basic attack, which is a 3, we add +1 for the neurotoxin, so that's 4 damage, and we're going to get the weaken status. So we take 4 damage, but we defend for 6, remember, and so we manage to defend all of that damage from his neurotoxin. But sadly, we are still going to be weakened. And when you're in a weakened state, you only do half damage. Okay, no problem. That's the end of the combat round. So at the end of the round, we cool down any statuses that we have. So we lose the stun, and the weakness cools down to weakness 1, and we start round 2. All right, hopefully we're going to do better this round. We're going to go in for the attack. Boom! Look at that. A shocking outcome. So this is a hit match. So we have an action score of 6 + 1, so that's a 7. Both of these die sit underneath the action score. It's doubles, which means it's a match. So we have a hit match or a critical hit. So the moment you have a critical hit, there's a couple of good things happen. You will be able to ready one of your cards if they're exhausted. We don't have any exhausted cards, so we don't get to take advantage of that benefit. We do get +2 grit, so our grit goes all the way up to 8. And the other cool thing is we get a bonus result on the attack, so it means we can use both of these dice to calculate the results. So we're going to get 6 damage on our Spiderwing Jimmy. 6 damage! Also, I'm going to use my weapon power. So Skegox has a special power called Cleave, which will give me +2 damage and overkill. Overkill's probably overkill in this particular instance. So we're going to do a total of 8 points of damage. And that's going to be enough to take out old Spiderwing Jimmy. He's only got 6 hit points and 1 armor. So 8 minus 1 is still 7 hit points. He's defeated. All right, so at the end of the combat, we get to kind of process the battleground. The individual enemy that we've defeated immediately goes to memories, and any equipment that he had goes into our inventory as equipment. Any combat statuses that we have are immediately removed, and then we conclude that particular location encounter. And it also goes directly to memories. All right, so we're not doing too badly. I guess sometimes at the conclusion of a big battle, you might possibly think about resting, but we're still at 7 hit points. We've got grit of 8. We're very, very determined. We do have 1 exhausted card, but I think we should continue. Just crack on and see what's out there. So we need to scout and move. So I'm going to do the scout action. And we have the secluded glade. All right, so I'm going to attach that here like so. Put a little exploration token just there. And, well, we'll check the peril track. There's nothing to do here. And we'll explore into the secluded glade. Time passes. We're going to lose one of these time tokens. The threat track goes up by 1. And we're going to check out what our little exploration token is. It's a grit boost. Oh, tragically, we're at grit 8. It can't go any higher. So we're at maximum grit. Maximum grit. And then we're going to have a look at J2, what the J2 encounter has to say. The secluded glade. You trigger a cluster of jungle clams. Okay. Jungle clams concealed in the dense undergrowth. These are skilled predators. The beetles have armoured shells that snap shut, trapping your leg within their formidable grip. Panic surges as the unyielding carapace closes tighter with each desperate struggle. The jungle's silence is broken only by the soft clicks of the beetles and your own laboured breath. Okay, so we have another peril choice at the bottom of this encounter, and it says we can either wedge the clam open by discarding an equipment, or we can tear our leg free. Well, I think tearing our leg free does not sound particularly good. So I'm going to give up one of our equipment items and pull out an iron spike, discard that, and we're going to choose wedge the clam. All right, so there are two different regions on our card here, the wedge the clam and tear your leg free. So we're only going to look at wedge the clam. You jam in a rusty iron spike and the beetle's grip loosens. And there's also a general on reveal here, and it says, within the clam, a clockwork pearl slowly unfolds. Gain a jungle arachnid as a companion and attach the tick-tock-tick persona. Okay, so this is an interesting location encounter. This little persona, the kind of blue box on the right with the little blue icon there, is something that we actually attach to a companion to give them a little bit more flavor. So we need to have a look in our jungle faction deck for an arachnid, another spider, Spiderwing Sook, and he's like so, looks similar but different to the other spider that we came across. And we attach the persona like so, just sits there, attaches onto the side. And I'm going to go through the details of the persona and give you a sense of what's going on here. So it says, tick-tock-tick, he's a pocket-sized peril. He has a trait, ignore denizen traits and powers. So basically all of the normal traits and powers on our spider, we're going to ignore them. He doesn't have any of those abilities. He's also small, so his maximum hit points is reduced by 2. So our normal maximum hit points are 6. So I'm just going to put a little reminder here that his maximum hit points are only 4. And he has a special power, so I can activate him during combat to self-destruct. And when he self-destructs, he's going to do as much damage, splash damage, so to all enemies in the fight, equal to his current hit points. And then he kind of perishes, blows up and dies. All right, so, well, it's pretty cool. Little clockwork spider running around. I wonder what we can do with our little friend. We need to, I think, scout and explore again. Oh, this time we're going to reveal the throne room. And this is the tile that we've been looking for, the Z3 tile. So we know that once we explore this location, it's going to progress our quest deck. Also, I notice that there's a secret door and a secret door on our throne room. I'm going to attach it this time at the secret door and put a little exploration token on top. We could just soldier on and explore the throne room, but I think it probably worth being a little bit cautious, and perhaps we should take a rest, process our memories, and make sure we're absolutely ready before we embark upon the exploration of the throne room. So let's do that. Let's take a rest action, and you can see exactly how that works. A rest action. The very first thing that happens when we rest and make camp is time passes. Okay, so this horrible creature that's been hunting us the entire quest, he's very close behind us now. There's only a single time token between him and us. We also increased the threat track, and it's got to the end of the threat track, so we're going to activate this ability, which says Impending Doom. We have a sense of impending doom, and our maximum health is reduced by 1. And that gets reset to the beginning of the track, like so. We get to recover all of our exhausted character cards in the hero tableau, and we also get to heal. We've got a couple of hit points to heal, and we heal with a 1 plus a boost card. I don't think we've looked at boost cards just yet. So whenever something says boost, and you'll see this all over the place, if you have an entangled enemy or if you're entangled, attacks against you would be boosted. You might have a power which gives you a boost, and so on and so forth. There are lots of reasons why you might be called upon to do a boost. And all that is to draw a loot card. We're not really interested in the loot card except for the bottom right hand corner. And this one has no boost icons. This one has 1 boost icon. And so essentially it will generate a number between 0 and 3. So in this case, we get 1 plus 1, 2 health. I should go back and take the original one that I drew. So I'll only take 1 plus 0, 1 health. So now we do any required rest abilities that we may have. And remember, we have the urchin with us. These required rest abilities are essentially anything that has at rest with a little hazard symbol in front of it. And she wants us to discard an equipment or lose 2 health. I'm going to discard our last remaining equipment card. And then we move on to the reflections and optional rest actions. So you may, depending on your hero, depending on the items you have a variety of optional actions. One of the ones I have here, for example, for the hunter, allows me to peek at a concealed enemy in pursuit. You can look at their spoor. And I think I'm going to do that to see what on earth is right behind us. This particular instance, it is a giant serpent. That is not great. He is a particularly savage and vicious beast. So we would like to probably keep him at bay if we can. That's the only at-rest ability I have, I think, that's worth applying here. So then we're left with experience points. So we have a look at the individual location encounters and enemies that we've defeated, and we can convert these to experience points. Any enemy that you've defeated that's not an elite enemy, you just get a single experience point for. If it was an elite enemy, they have a little shield here, then you'd get 2 experience points. So we just get 1 for him. He goes to the back of the faction deck from whence he came. Then the individual encounters that we have, there'll be a number of little icons that sit in the left-hand corner of those location encounters. So we've got 3 little icons there. 3 icons. Put these to the side. I get 3 more experience points. So also during this step for reflection, we really need to assign these experience points to something to improve things. We can hold them for a rainy day for the next time we rest, or we can apply them now to specific aspects of our hero. There's a variety of different things that are listed under the reflection section of the little component here. We could use experience points to gain grit, to increase our max hit points, even to increase, very expensive, but we could also increase the grit reset if it were below 2. I think none of these things we really want to do. Another option is potentially to increase the ability of some of your talents or items that you have in your tableau. So we only have 1 item that has a little region here that we can use to improve its ability. It has, every time we add a mastery to this knife, we're going to get a +1 hit point for damage. I don't think we have, well, I don't think we really have anything else we can use there. So why don't we spend some experience points doing that? All right, so you'll notice that there's a keyword here, leisure de main, which is a kind of sleight of hand. If we had that keyword on our hero, then we can kind of apply these tokens on a one-for-one basis if we have a matching mastery keyword. We don't have that, so we can take any experience. If we spend 2 experience points, we can put a single mastery token onto that card. I'm going to do that twice. Yeah. So we have spent our time at camp mastering the keen throwing knife for a rainy day, spinning it on our finger perhaps to see whether or not we'll use it. Let's have a look. All right, so that's the end of our rest action. At the end of a rest action, we're going to break camp. And all we do when we break camp is check to see if we've exceeded any of our inventory limits that we may have. There's only so many items you can have revealed. There's only so many companions you can have and so many equipment that you can carry. We're well below the maximums here, but if we did have a lot of these items, we would now have to discard down to those limits. I think there's an important distinction. When you're actually playing the game outside of the rest action, you can have as many items, as many equipment, as many companions as you like. There's no limit to what you can have in your inventory. It's only when you rest and you contemplate at that particular point, companions will leave, you have to leave some of your equipment behind, and so on. So it's only when you break camp do we look at any of these sort of limitations that you might see with respect to the items that you're carrying. Okay, nothing else to do there. We will finish the rest action.